Here's an embarrassing confession. If I asked you right now who actually owns Jeep, or why Lexus exists, or whether Kia and Hyundai are basically the same company wearing different outfits, could you actually answer that? Be honest. Most people can't. And here's the thing that makes it worse. You're supposed to know this stuff. You're about to drop tens of thousands of dollars on a car, possibly the second biggest purchase of your entire life after a house. And you're doing it while having genuinely no idea that the luxury badge on the hood is sometimes just the exact same car underneath with better seats and a bigger price tag. With most products, life gives you two simple choices: Coke or Pepsi, iPhone or Android. Done. Cars decided that wasn't confusing enough. So instead you get a wall of a few dozen brand names, half of which secretly belong to the same 3 or 4 companies. And nobody bothers explaining any of it to you before you're standing on a dealership lot trying to look like you know what you're doing. I actually grew up around this. My family was in the car business, and even I didn't automatically know that one Korean automaker owns more than a third of another one because of a bankruptcy deal back in the 90s. So if you've ever felt lost trying to figure out which brand is actually good, you're not behind. Nobody explained the rules. Let's fix that right now. We're breaking this into 3 groups: Asian, American, and European. And I promise it'll make a lot more sense once you see the pattern, because there is a pattern, and once you see it, you'll never look at a car badge the same way again. Group 1, the Asian brands. Toyota is the heavyweight here, the biggest, most popular Japanese brand, going head-to-head with Honda, with Nissan rounding out the big 3. Japanese cars built their entire reputation on being reliable and fuel-efficient, which is genuinely great, right up until the 1980s, when apparently these brands looked around and decided they wanted an invitation to the luxury car party too. So here's the twist that trips almost everyone up. Several of these brands secretly have an entirely separate identity. Honda created Acura specifically to sell more premium vehicles without diluting Honda's everyday, reliable image. It's genuinely the same engineering DNA underneath, just dressed up and sold through different dealerships. Toyota did the exact same thing with Lexus. Nissan did it with Infiniti. 3 different luxury brands, and every single one of them is just the parent company's more expensive alter ego. And the tangled family tree doesn't stop there. Nissan owns a chunk of Mitsubishi. Toyota holds stakes in both Subaru and Mazda. And Mazda actually used to belong to Ford before Ford basically handed it off, with Toyota later buying in. It genuinely sounds made up. It's not. Then there's South Korea, where Hyundai sits at the top of the chain. And here's the detail that surprises people the most. Hyundai owns the majority stake in Kia, which is exactly why those 2 brands often share so much under the hood, despite feeling like separate companies on the lot. Group 2, the American brands. 3 companies dominate this entire category, and each one owns a small empire of brands you probably assumed were independent. Ford owns Ford, obviously, including the Mustang, which sometimes gets its own logo treatment but is still, underneath it all, a Ford. Ford also runs Lincoln as its luxury alter ego. And here's the part that genuinely surprises people. Ford used to own Mazda, Jaguar, Volvo, and Land Rover, and quietly let almost all of them go over the years, plus one brand, Mercury, that got discontinued entirely. General Motors, or GM, is next, and it's the parent of Chevrolet, their flagship, plus GMC, which largely overlaps with Chevy under the surface. GM also owns Cadillac as its luxury division, and Buick, which occupies this strange in-between space that never quite decided whether it wanted to be premium or mainstream. Worth a quick mention here too. Several newer American EV-focused brands, Tesla, Rivian, Lucid, Fisker, exist somewhat outside this traditional 3-company structure, essentially watching the old guard from the sidelines while building their own thing. The third major player is Stellantis, and this is where things get genuinely wild. It's essentially a holding company that swallowed up a huge chunk of the historic American auto industry. Chrysler, once considered one of America's original Big 3 on its own, is now just one piece of Stellantis, alongside Jeep, Dodge, and Ram. Group 3, the European brands. Here's where it gets even stranger, because Stellantis, that same company holding Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, and Ram, is actually based in the Netherlands and also owns several European names: Fiat, Maserati, and Alfa Romeo. You won't see as many of these on American roads, but they're part of the same corporate web. Beyond that, BMW owns Mini, Mercedes-Benz stands as BMW's biggest direct rival and notably doesn't bother hiding behind a separate luxury sub-brand. It just is the luxury brand. And then there's the genuinely bizarre one. Volkswagen, generally seen as the more mainstream, everyday European option, somehow owns Lamborghini. Volkswagen also runs Audi as its more upscale division, along with Porsche. Rounding things out, Land Rover and Jaguar are both owned by the same British parent company, while Volvo, originally Swedish, once owned by Ford, is now owned by a Chinese automotive company. So, Asian, American, European. 3 groups, dozens of names, and honestly, about 6 or 7 actual parent companies pulling the strings behind almost all of it. Now here's where this stops being trivia and starts actually mattering for your wallet. Mistake 1. Assuming the luxury badge means fundamentally different engineering. Lexus, Acura, Infiniti. These exist specifically so a parent company can charge more for a version of essentially the same car, wrapped in better materials and marketing. That doesn't mean they're bad. The build quality genuinely can be nicer, but understand what you're actually paying the premium for. Comfort, styling, and badge prestige, not some radically different engineering underneath. Know that going in, and you negotiate very differently than someone who thinks they're buying something entirely separate from the mainstream brand next door. Mistake 2. Treating every brand within one company as equally reliable. Because so many brands share platforms, engines, and parts with their siblings, reliability patterns often cluster by parent company more than by badge. If a specific engine or transmission has known issues in one brand, there's a real chance the same part shows up quietly in 2 or 3 different cars from the same corporate family. Look up shared platforms before you buy, not after. Mistake 3. Picking a car purely on how cool it looks. Here's a genuinely useful, if painfully oversimplified way to sort all of this. Think of it as a rough scale between looks cool and actually lasts. European brands generally sit toward the cool, stylish end, and generally the less reliable end too. I owned an Alfa Romeo, loved how it looked. My mechanic eventually told me, flatly, that this exact model tends to start falling apart around 50,000 miles. I sold it. Genuinely gorgeous car. Genuinely not built for the long haul, at least not without real maintenance discipline. American brands tend to land somewhere in the middle, not as flashy, generally a bit more durable than their European counterparts, especially from the traditional Big Three. And the Asian brands, particularly Toyota and Honda, consistently rank among the most reliable in the world. Less flashy, usually less expensive to maintain, built with longevity as the entire point. This is an extremely generic rule, and there are plenty of exceptions in every direction. Some European models are shockingly reliable. Some Asian models are genuinely exciting to drive. But as a rough starting filter before you dive into specific reviews for the exact model you're considering, it holds up surprisingly well. Mistake 4. Not checking who actually owns the brand before you buy. This sounds excessive, but it genuinely matters, because parent company decisions trickle down into everything. Recall handling, parts availability, dealership support, even which features get prioritized in future models. A brand quietly discontinued by its parent company, the way Mercury was by Ford, can leave owners with dwindling part support and resale value years down the line. Knowing the corporate structure isn't trivia for car nerds. It's a genuine signal of how stable and supported your specific brand actually is going forward. So here's the actual takeaway. The car industry looks like an overwhelming maze of dozens of competing brands, and on the surface, that's exactly what it is. But underneath, it collapses down to a much smaller number of actual decision makers. A handful of parent companies in Japan, Korea, Detroit, Germany, and the Netherlands, each running 2, 3, sometimes 4 brands simultaneously, wearing different outfits for different price points and different buyers. You don't need to memorize every ownership chart, but knowing that Lexus is just dressed up Toyota, that Buick and Cadillac both answer to GM, that Volkswagen somehow owns Lamborghini, that knowledge changes how you shop. It stops you from paying a premium for an illusion, and it helps you actually understand what you're getting before you sign anything. Walk onto that lot knowing the real family tree, and you're not the confused kid staring at 40 badges anymore. You're the person who actually knows what's under the hood, literally and corporately.